Building teams, that's sort of the scope of what we're going to be talking about tonight. As I understand it, many of you are trying to think about building a startup. You may be a lone ranger, you may be just an ideator at the moment without a team, or some of you may have already built teams and already started to begin thinking about how you would build your business. But regardless of what stage you're in, I think this is going to be helpful for you. We've already talked about my background. Prior to being here today, both Nordstrom and Amazon. Right now, I have a real estate investment company that my wife and I are working on. I actually run a transportation company in the agricultural industry and work with my family on that. I am doing some consulting for Pullman Regional Hospital, which is kind of a new thing. I'm a board member for Young Life, and I serve on the Seattle University Albers School of Business Advisory Board. So I love contributing and giving back in different ways, and that's why I'm here today. We talked a lot about, you sort of listed off all the different jobs I've had at Amazon, but the reason that I wanted to highlight them for a minute is because I think most of you have the perception that Amazon is this behemoth company, and it is, but that that it operates like a big company, and it really doesn't. Amazon really operates like a million little startups under the umbrella of Amazon. And some of the jobs that I had were startup jobs, and those were my favorite jobs. When I was recruited by Amazon from Nordstrom, my first job, first day on the job, I had nothing to do. I had a laptop and no assignments, no boss, nothing to do. I had been hired to write a business plan to launch Softlines on Amazon and to present it to Jeff Bezos in a couple of months. And so I really did truly start with the proverbial clean sheet of paper. And that is the only time I've done that, start completely from scratch. And it is very, very exciting and very difficult all at the same time. The complete opposite of that, I ran a very large and dying category at Amazon, mobile electronics. Do you guys remember GPS devices, MP3 players, all of those gadgets that no longer really matter or exist? I ran that category, and it was a difficult job because it was a billion-dollar business in decline, and the margins were really, really tight. And somehow I was expected to grow the business and improve the margins. So that was a very different job, as you can imagine, than building a new business off of a clean sheet of paper. And then along the way, I sort of got tapped to work on a lot of M&A work, merger and acquisition work. Amazon, in the early days, did not invest in other companies. They tended to build everything from within. So when I came on board, I think it was my 30th day on the job, week 4, and somebody comes to me and says, hey, we're thinking of buying Zappos. What do you think? Let's dive into the financials and see what kind of an investment that would be. And I sort of said, why did you hire me if you were going to buy Zappos? Because you don't need both. Ended up that we actually did do both. We built our own, and then we acquired Zappos for the sake of all the customers that they brought. So the merger and acquisition work was also really interesting and very entrepreneurial for Amazon. And then the last job that I had, founding private brands, was also super entrepreneurial. My team launched 83 privately owned clothing brands within 8 months, and you can buy all of those on Amazon today. So leadership, no matter what kind of leadership it is, no matter what kind of company you're running, and no matter what kind of idea you have, leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. And the better you can do that, the better leader you will be. And so if you're a startup person who's got an idea, and tonight you're trying to form a team and you're missing team members, the more compelling your story is about the vision that you have and the product that you want to take to the world, the more, I think, successful you'll be. So whether you're a software developer who's trying to come up with new facial recognition tools, or whether you've got a new superfood that you're going to launch to save the world, or whether you're still trying to build an innovative apparel merchandising idea and sell clothing to new customers, you've got to start with a team. Every one of you needs to have a strong team surrounding your business idea. And so I think some people just think of, well, great, who's going to do marketing and who's going to do operations and who's going to design my website? But I want to expand the definition of team a bit for all of you tonight. First of all, start with yourself and think about your own skills and your own shortcomings. Think about finding a leadership coach to help you in this endeavor. If you really do go down the startup path, it'll be some of the most difficult work you've ever done. And it's unlikely that you're prepared for it today. It's unlikely that any founder is prepared to go through the work of a startup today. So think about finding someone who can help you with your leadership. And then separately, find a business mentor. And I know you're probably thinking, I didn't come here tonight for someone to remind me that I need a mentor. But I think a lot of us think that mentors are for people who are just getting started. They don't know anybody. They don't really quite know which way to go or kind of what to do. But I want to show you this list. And you can't read it because I realize my slides aren't very legible from the back. But these are incredible people who today give credit most of their success to their mentor. Did you know Lady Gaga's mentor is Elton John? Did you know that Bill Gates is mentored by Warren Buffett? What an incredible mentor to have. Did you know that Kanye West, even though he's suing him, has been mentored by Jay-Z? So everybody needs a mentor. No matter how high you are in your game or whether you're just starting out today, you really do need a mentor. And so I wanted to make sure to mention that. That should be a part of your team. And then as you're thinking about building your team, I know that, again, everyone's focused on the functional needs. I need an ops person. I need marketing. I'm a software developer, and so I don't know anything about sales. But I think when you're building a team, you need to think much more broadly about how to make up a team. So there's the obvious area and level of expertise. But also think about your own strengths. If you're really highly analytical, then maybe you need to hire some people who are really intuitive to balance you out. If you are incredibly detail-oriented but you lack vision, maybe you need to hire somebody to help you build vision. If you tend to be really conservative in nature, then you need people on your team who are going to push you because startups don't succeed off of conservatism. So, and then lastly, think about your own style. Some people are incredibly extroverted and inclusive, and they're natural magnets to other leaders, and other people are introverted. Hire around your weaknesses and build a team that complements your own strengths and opportunities. When you think about functional experts, each one of your startups has some number of functions that will be required for you to launch. And I guess it depends on what your business model is for you to think about what those are. If you were the one that was founding Uber back in the day, you obviously needed a strong technologist, you needed a strong product manager, you needed somebody strong in marketing. But you may not have needed sales. It's a fairly sort of consumer-driven model. So for each one of your business ideas, you have to think about which functional experts are going to drive your company. So Nike is a marketing-driven machine. Everyone knows that their genius is around their marketing. Apple is a product-driven machine. So what's going to drive your startup or your idea? What's the secret sauce that you need to make sure you hire a rock star around? Think about the functional areas that way and determine which ones are critical for you to have top talent, whether it be other students or as you grow the business, hiring other industry experts. Think about which functions you've got to absolutely nail in order to launch your startup. The other thing I think is super important to think about beyond the functions themselves is the mix of leaders. There is definitely value in experience. And so you can go hire an industry veteran to join your advisory board, or you can hire an industry veteran to come and maybe work for free and help you with your idea. But there are also many companies that were founded by people who knew nothing about their industry. Think about all the voice search that's happening right now with Amazon and Google. Who were the experts in search 5 years ago? There weren't any. It didn't exist. So Amazon wasn't able to go hire a search expert or a voice expert. They had to find smart people who could develop those skills for themselves. So when you're thinking about building your team, don't just think about industry experts or functional experts. Think about people who are really good at problem solving. You want them on your team. Think about when you're hiring in the future, if you have everybody's from a startup, it's probably a bit of a goat rodeo. But if you hire some people who have the discipline of having worked in a company, a public company, that had to show profitability, had a lot of rigor around their process and their planning, it's probably going to be a good balance for all of the people that have startup experience. Think about the people who worked at Boeing or who do work at Boeing. Typically, they're traditional folks. Boeing hasn't been a disruptive company as large and successful as it is. So you've got to think about, do you need a traditional leader or do you need a disruptor? Somebody who's done something really different in the world and caused lots of disruption. Think about the business models that people have worked under. If somebody's come from a traditional brick and mortar retail business model, that's fine. That's where I came from. But that industry's dying. So where do you find the next retail innovator? It may not be at a traditional retail company anymore. And lastly, we always want to hire winners. But if you're in a startup, there's a big chance you're going to fail. Do you have anybody on your team who knows how to fail? Do you have anybody on your team who has gone through failure and knows that it's an incredible learning experience? So you don't just want a bunch of people who've just had stellar success in their career. You may want someone on your team who has gone through a business that's folded or a business model that didn't work or an idea that failed. And lastly, are the people on your team more data-driven or more intuitive? This mix is super important to me when I'm building teams. And every team that I've built, I've tried to think about as many different ways to measure the diversity of the team as I can. How many of the people on your team are change agents? If you have an innovative idea, they're going to help you push it forward. Usually that's the minority, and the rest of us fall into the resistor category. So do you have enough change agents? And are you going to be able to manage the resistors on your team? Because we all fall in one of those buckets. Professional evolution. When you're looking at someone's resume, if they've been accountant with growing levels of responsibility, what do you know? You know they're an awesome accountant. But are they going to be able to help you build a new, innovative business model? They may be able to help you build the books for it, but they may not have had the experience of having to reinvent accounting. Lastly, pace, tortoise and the hare. This is probably one of the biggest reasons that people fail at Amazon is the pace. It is a very high pace, intense work environment. And for a lot of folks, that is just not a good fit. And so on your team, how fast do you want your team to go? Maybe as a group, you want to be more of a tortoise. You just want to kind of keep plugging at it. And maybe you agree as a group that you're going to sprint really hard for 6 months. And if it doesn't work, you're going to give up. Neither approach is right or wrong, but think about the pace of the people on your team. And lastly, like this, independent or collaborators. There are some people who love to go off in a corner, leave them alone, and they'll figure it out, and they will do great work for you. And there's other people that can't do anything unless there's 6 people around a table collaborating. You need both. So do you have collaborators that can work together? And do you have those workhorses that can go off in a room and figure it out all by themselves? So just think about the mix of your team and about when people are approaching you and they want to be on your team. These are questions you might want to start to tease out is what kind of a person are they? How will they contribute? What will their tendencies be? One of the other things that you need as part of your team is a board. But different companies at different parts of their life cycle and their development. That is really hard to read. Sorry, guys. There is a very significant difference between a board of directors and an advisory board. An advisory board is a really powerful tool for a startup. Think about building an advisory board. An advisory board is an informal committee. They have no voting rights, they have no power, they have no fiduciary responsibility. They're basically just people that you ask to come, contribute to your process, give you ideas, challenge you to think differently. And it's an informal arrangement, not necessarily even compensated. A board of directors is a legal requirement for a public company. Even the number of directors is determined by the law. The members are legally bound to the business. They do have a fiduciary responsibility, and they are there to ensure that the business is run for the best interest of all the shareholders, which is why it's required by law. So board of directors and advisory board, not synonyms, but both super important. And there's no reason you have to wait until you launch to build an advisory board. Build an advisory board now and figure out who you might know within your networks. Could be professors, could be students, could be grad students, could be people in the industry, could be old bosses, but build an advisory board for your team now and take advantage of the learning and the experience and the wisdom that they can offer. As you're forming these teams, there are 100 different ways that you can categorize people. And you've all taken way too many personality tests in different classes. But this is a really interesting one. Look it up when you have a moment. 5 types of employees you'll find on your startup journey and how to manage them. Gazelles, monkeys, hyenas, lions, and rhinos. I will let you look up the definitions, but this is a really interesting tool, and I was not the animal that I thought I was. So I encourage you to think about that or use any other tool that you have. So you build a team, and you haven't gone to market yet. You're just working on a business plan. And the business plan competition is what, April 25th? Who's the leader? Who's going to be the leader? Naturally, somebody's going to step up. Somebody could be you, or somebody could be someone else on your team. But you need to find a leader. And if you decide to step up and be that leader, I want to give you a few suggestions on how to manage and work with peers. People that you don't control, you can't hire them, and you can't fire them because you go to school with them. Or they are contributing to your business out of the goodness of their hearts. You're not even paying them, but yet you need to manage the process. You need to be able to work through all the issues that a startup has to work through. So how do you do that when these people aren't your employees? A couple of tips, and some of these are super obvious, but I think collectively it's a helpful list. Work collaboratively toward alignment. The key word here isn't the collaborative word, it's the alignment word. Until everybody around the table is completely aligned on the vision, you're stuck. Work collaboratively toward alignment. And the more ambiguous or innovative or disruptive your idea is, the more difficult it may be to reach alignment. Reaching alignment takes a lot of work and a lot of time. This may not be one meeting and now we're good. This may be many meetings. But work tirelessly and collaboratively to get to alignment, because it will determine where you go and everyone will be rowing in the same direction. And it's really the most important way for you to spend your time early on. Second, if you want to lead the team, don't be bashful. say to the team in as sort of humble or graceful way as you can, hey, I'd be willing to lead this project. I'd be willing to step up and do the work, because it is more work to be the leader than to be one of the participants or one of the team. But if you want to do that, don't wait for someone to notice your excitement or your passion. Tell the team, hey, if nobody else wants to, or if somebody wants to partner with me, great, but I'm interested in leading. This is an exciting opportunity for me to develop my leadership skills, and I'd love to lead this project or this startup or this business plan competition work. So let's assume that everybody's good with that, and you're now the leader. One of the most important things that you've got to do is make sure that you've got everybody on the team engaged. And you are going to have people that are more introverted than others. You're going to have the super smart guy, and it was his idea, and he could talk about it for 3 hours. And you're going to have somebody else who's there, and they're super excited to be there, but they have no idea what to do. They just know that they love marketing, and they're on this team, and they are concerned because they don't know exactly what to do. You as the leader, you've got to tease out the goodness of all of them. And so whether it be the ideator themselves, or whether it be one of the people on the team who is new and has less obvious contribution, your job is to make sure that everyone is deeply engaged. Tread lightly. Remember, these people can all throw you off their ship anytime they want. So tread lightly, respect them. And one of my reading recommendations at the end of this talk is a list of books that I really believe in. And one of them is called The Servant Leader. Really practice servant leadership, especially when you're working with people who don't have to report to you. You can't fire them. You really can only influence them. The number one way for you to earn the respect of the group of people that you're going to lead is through contributing something that's very credible. They will love you if you do great work. If you don't do great work and you just talk a lot, they won't. So the best way to establish credibility is through your competence and the deliverables of what you actually accomplish. So earn their trust, earn their respect through your competency. Work harder than the rest of them, because it is more work to be the leader, and everybody knows that. So if you're trying to be the leader who doesn't work hard, it doesn't work. So definitely put in the time and make sure that they all know that you're completely vested in the success of the team. And then lastly, ask for feedback. You've probably never run a company before. So now you're trying to run a startup team. Ask for feedback, brutally honest feedback. Ask them how they feel about the way things are going. Ask them how they feel about the collaboration of the team. Ask them if they feel like they've been heard. But definitely ask for feedback, lots of feedback. Once you've got the team and you're the leader, you guys have a finite amount of time to get the job done. Whether you're thinking about it as the competition itself as your deadline, whether you're thinking about it as a fundraising round that you know you want to go on in the fall, or whether you are further along than that and you know you have a launch date, you have a finite amount of time. And no matter how hard you work, you won't go fast enough. So one of the things as a leader that you can do that's super important is to make sure that everyone around the table knows exactly what's expected of them. So for each functional leader, let's say it's operations, make sure they know exactly what the priorities are for that operations role on the team. Your view of operations and their view of operations, or the prioritization within that, might look really different. So make sure that as a leadership team, you help each other identify the priorities of each one of these leaders. Write a job description. Even if it's a half a page and 6 bullet points, write a job description. This is what I'm doing, and if it's not on here, I'm not doing it. This is what I'm working on, and make sure everybody's aligned. Later, if your company takes off and somebody wants to buy it, and we're trying to figure out how much equity everybody should get, knowing who did what, who was responsible for what, who contributed in what areas and how much will be super, super important. So make sure that you agree on the jobs. Make sure people understand what the resource allocations are. Hey, you're gonna lead marketing and you're not gonna have any employees and our budget is $100 a week and that's it, so get creative. Now somebody else on the team might have a budget of $10,000 because somebody is willing to help you invest in technology. So make sure everybody knows what their resource pool is, whether they have other people on the team, whether they have dollar resources, or any other kind of resources to help them get their job done. And then agree on how much time commitment this is. These are not full-time jobs yet. You guys are all juggling many, many things. Agree on how much time everybody on the team needs to contribute in order to get the job done. And maybe it is a 40-hour-a-week job and everybody agrees with that, and that just means you don't sleep a lot. But just make sure everybody's in agreement. You don't want one person thinking it's a 40-hour-a-week job and one person working 5 hours a week on a Saturday afternoon. You've got to make sure you're aligned on the time commitment. Types of engagement. So most of you who form informal teams are going to be working as co-founders. And someday you may be able to contribute, you may be able to compensate yourselves and each other with cash or cash and equity. But most of you here are going to be thinking about this in terms of like a co-founding team. As you grow, though, there's many ways that you can leverage resources, and they don't all have to be traditional employees. You can hire employees. You can come up with a model where you don't actually have to pay them cash. You pay them equity at the time you launch, if and when you launch. You can hire a contractor, a service provider who works by project, build app X to these specs, and we write you a check for this much, and that's it, you're out. And when we go public, it doesn't matter how big we get, you got your X amount of dollars. Use freelancers. If you have a product that's really marketing focused, hire freelancers and help them understand that you're just gonna pay them by the piece. And lastly, you know, there's angel investors who, some of them will contribute cash for a stake. Some of them may just contribute expertise for a stake. So there's many different arrangements, and you should think really creatively about all of them. This resource is incredible. If you've never used it or seen it before, it's the Keep It Simple Security financing generator. Basically, a zillion startups have contributed their financing models to this database, and it's a very simple way to structure equity arrangements or cash and equity arrangements for people who are joining your startup at whatever level. So really great resource. Let's say that you're the ideator. You were the guy with the idea. And you're super excited about the idea. You've now filled out your team of functional leaders. And you are the software engineer. That's your thing. You might hire a couple buddies to help, but that's your thing. Everybody else has other functional areas that they're leading. And let's say that you have volunteered to be the team leader. You're gonna act as CEO for this startup. So how are you gonna contribute to all the other functions? You're the leader, so you're sort of expected to contribute to every part of the company, but you don't know anything about marketing. You're a software developer. How are you going to have the respect and the culture that allows you to contribute to all the different functions? I think the first thing I'd say is, as a team leader, build a culture that sort of celebrates curiosity. You know, most people who've worked in the business world for any amount of time have worked for at least one company that has neat little sandboxes, and you stay in yours and we'll be good, and you stay in yours and we'll be good, and I'll stay in mine and we're all good. That works great for some companies, but it doesn't work very well for a small company or a startup. The sandboxes are irrelevant. In fact, they're sort of counter collaborative. So build a culture that encourages curiosity. In my teams, I want the software engineer who knows nothing about marketing saying, why did we send this email? I don't get it. This email doesn't seem like it has a very clear message. It's not very targeted. And if you're the marketing person, you might feel really proud of that email, but listen to their feedback. They're a customer. Lots of finance people are super inquisitive. And so your finance person might say to your salesperson, you know, you are putting way too much markup in this product. If we could sell this for a lot less with thinner margins, you'd sell way more units. And then we could achieve some scale. So you want to encourage cross-collaboration. Blow up the sandboxes. They're very counter-collaborative in any small company or startup. So create that culture, and if you're the leader, you can do that. Invite people into your area of expertise and ask them as a novice or as a layperson, what do they think about what you're doing, even though it's not their area of expertise. Self-educate. This is a really simple thing that most people don't do. Any one of you in this room could learn any discipline that you wanted after school. If you leave here with a marketing degree, you could go be a CFO if you wanted. If you left here with an accounting degree, you could go be a CMO if you wanted. But what it requires is for you to teach yourself the discipline through experience and self-education and curiosity. So if you're trying to contribute to a function that you don't have training or expertise in, learn it. That's how everybody else did. So dive in and learn it, self-educate. I use the voice search example here. When Jeff Bezos hired a key leader to go start voice search, he knew nothing about voice search. And who's he going to learn it from? There's no books, there's no experts, so he had to just be smart and learn it and think about it like a customer would. And then do work. If you're really interested in that function and you really want to help out, and I'm a software engineer and you're that marketing person, I should say, hey, can I come hang out with you? Can you walk me through how we build marketing targeted emails? I want to understand. Let me build one, show me. And that kind of collaboration is super important within startups. So go do work. Don't just have a lot of opinions. Roll up your sleeves and do the work. Join their team. Say, I actually would love to help you. I'm going to jump in with you. And then lastly, audit. Auditing, just like when the IRS picks you someday, hopefully not, to audit their tax return. It is a random audit. There are certain behaviors that trigger the audit, as they should, but it is just a random, these are all the suspects, we're going to pick a name, and this is who we're auditing today. You as a business leader should do the same thing. You should audit everything. Ask lots of questions and dig into the details. So you're wondering, what does that really mean? How do I actually audit? I'm not an auditor. I'm not a finance person, so how do I audit? How do I audit a finance function? Here's my favorite tool for auditing. How many of you have heard of the 5 whys? Come on. I knew there had to be at least one or two. There's different names for this. This is something that has a few different variations if you just go research it. It's sort of a Socratic reasoning thing where you're sort of literally saying why to the 5th why. So let's imagine that you are the CEO of Uber and you're trying to audit the customer experience of the Uber app. And you came from Procter & Gamble and you're a marketing expert. You are not a technologist and you have no idea how the actual engine is built. So how do you audit? You literally ask these questions. You say, hey, I was standing on a curb and I called an Uber. And when the Uber said he was there, he wasn't there. He was 3 blocks over. That's the problem. So the question is, why was the Uber 3 blocks over when, according to the app, he was right in front of me on the intersection that I was standing at? And the person answers the question, well, the reason is because sometimes there's latency in the app and the Uber isn't yet where he should be. And so even though it appears that he's in front of you, he's not. So the second question is, why is there latency in the app? Well, the reason there's latency in the app is because if we spent way more money, if you gave us an unlimited budget, we could buy way more servers and we could build a much faster mousetrap. And we could have zero latency, but it costs so much money. How much money does it cost to improve the latency of the app? And then somebody says, well, here's an estimate, costs this much. Why does it cost that much? And I guarantee you, before you get to 5, my experience is usually by 2 or 3, the light bulb goes on and everyone's like, oh, never realized that. There's usually a very simple thing that somebody missed somewhere along the way. And by using this questioning method, you will figure out the root cause. So the 5 whys, I'd encourage you to research it. There's actually tons of books written about it. You don't need to read a book. It's actually a very simple thing. But read a few articles about it and practice it. It is very, very powerful. When I was running one of the Amazon subsidiaries, and we were doing a technical integration, we were moving all of the backend systems from that subsidiary onto the Amazon stack. And one of them was all the credit card authorizations. And so, as you know, there's also all sorts of regulations around privacy. These are super sensitive transactions. And so we had moved all of the fraud alert flagging from the subsidiary to Amazon. At the subsidiary, it was actually a guy who sat at a desk and ran scripts and looked for anomalies. And within 24 hours, you would get an order confirmation, because that's how long it took him to go through all the orders. And so obviously, Amazon wanted to automate all that, so we moved it over, all of those, onto the sort of standard fraud mechanisms, and we launched it. And in the middle of the night, like $3.5 million of fraudulent transactions were released and shipped. And I'm like, oh shit. So we immediately go into a war room. You've heard about these things. You go into a war room and you work 24 hours a day until you figure out what the heck happened, because it can't happen again. And so as you're asking those 5 whys, that's how I did it, because I'm not a transaction engineer. I'm not a fraud expert. The CTO of the company reported to me, but I'm not a technologist. So I used the 5 whys to help me figure out what had happened, exactly the way I was describing in that example with Uber. And so it sort of went through this sort of, why did the transaction get shipped? Well, it got shipped because it got released even though it had been denied. Well, why did it get released if it had been denied? Well, there's 2 separate systems, and once it gets approved, it goes here for order fulfillment, and it goes here for financial transaction verification. Why are there 2, pipelines of information? And we basically learned that by having that double and parallel approval, that we were, because of a timing issue, missing fraudulent transactions. So then we realized that we'd been missing them for years. And we went back and found that there were transactions, even in the Amazon automated technology, that had been missed. And this was a way that we were going to be able to improve them. So the 5 whys is a way for you to investigate anything that you don't know anything about. And it's a super powerful thing. And so as the leader of a startup team, when you want to ask questions and add value to a function that is the furthest from your expertise, use this 5 whys. It can be annoying, if not managed in the right way. I mean, it can be like a 5-year-old in there, why? So, you've got to really be thoughtful about the way you use it, but it's a really powerful tool. I know we have a bunch of technologists and engineers in the room, and then there's the rest of us. How many of you in this room would consider yourself a technologist? So like a third. Okay, so I'm not. I'm in the not bucket. One of the things that I worked really hard to do at Amazon was to learn how to work with technologists, because there's nothing more annoying to a technologist than a non-technologist who's annoying to work with. And so one of the ways that I did that was by really trying to understand and learn their process. And so some of this is through trial and error, but these are key points that if you're not a technologist, you should remember and file away for the future when you're working with technologists. The first one is, these are not short order cooks. You don't sit them down and say, I've got this amazing website in my head, and I want it exactly like this. And I want this up to the right, and then down to the left, I want this. And when you click here, you're gonna go here. This isn't Mel's Diner, and these are not short order cooks. You bring them in day one, and you explain to them the problem you're trying to solve. And you ask them to partner with you in thinking through the solution. So please don't prescribe a solution and bring them in on day one. Don't wait until 3 months in when you've already narrowed it down. That's annoying too. And a good technologist will back you all the way up and make you start over. So bring them in day one. And for the technologists in the room, you can thank me later. Be able to explain why the problem that you are facing is actually a problem. Because in my experience, there are people who describe it, and I'm like, and? Sounds perfect. Well, I don't like it that way. I think it should really work this way, and here's why. But, okay, great, but why is it a problem? Why should we spend time fixing it? Maybe because you have, maybe you have a better idea, but be able to articulate why. What's it gonna do for us? Technology resources are incredibly expensive. They are difficult to hire. There's never enough of them. And so you need to be able to articulate why what you want is actually important. Don't assume that it's important just because it's what you think. Let the designer or the engineer propose the solutions. Be open to any solution as long as it solves the problem that you've articulated. Learn the vernacular and use it correctly. Don't be the awkward person that can never remember when we're talking about UX versus CX, or they don't know what an API is, or they confuse an attribute with an algorithm and they're just constantly confused. Figure it out. It's not that hard, and you'll be a much better partner in working with the other technologists on the team. So learn the vernacular. Understand the data structures. Ask your technology partners to draw the data structures and the way that they flow together on a whiteboard for you. It's important for you to understand them. It's important for you to understand where did the data come from. And technologists can make data flow in every which way, but they don't control the quality of the data that they ingest. Usually it's the business folks who've created such a mess of data, and then somehow the technologists are supposed to make it produce some incredible output. Understand the data structures, understand how they flow, understand their shortcomings, and a lot of those I think you can control. Learn to articulate business requirements and their prioritization. When I joined Amazon to start Softlines, because Jeff Bezos said, if we can't build a zillion-dollar grocery business and a zillion-dollar apparel business, then we can't be the world's largest e-commerce company. So I was one of the guys that was hired to build the apparel Softlines sort of department store side of Amazon. And you have to understand, Amazon was built on the backs of media products. Media products or books, even a better example. There's an ISBN, and there's only one of them. Maybe it has a variation of hardcover and softcover. maybe. Or the movie might come in different formats. Not so much now, it's all digital, but in the past, there'd be a DVD or a Blu-ray maybe. So Amazon did not have any systems that worked in any way, shape, or form to support seasonality, color, size, and a 3-tiered data structure. And so I was sitting with technologists constantly saying, your book system doesn't work for clothing. Your, grocery freshness algorithms don't work for fashion. And I had written this incredible document. It was probably 50 pages of business requirements. I was super proud of it. And I sat down with this brand new VP of technology that I'd been told he had been hired and told, your number one goal for the next 2 years is to make Garth happy, do whatever you want to build whatever he needs. Make a softlines business at Amazon work, because it doesn't work very well on the back end today. So I deliver this big document to him, and he doesn't even respond to my email. He won't go to a meeting. I'm like, what is up? I've worked tirelessly on this document, and I need to get moving. So I literally heard that the guy went on long walks, and if you wanted any time with him, you just go on a walk. So I went on a walk with Patrick, and I said, Patrick, I don't get it. I have worked really hard to articulate my business requirements. You have everything you could ever need, and I feel real confident about it. He's like, that thing was a mess. He's like, that had so much mumbo jumbo, whatever. He goes, I don't even know where to start. And so I said, well, how can I help you? He goes, what would be the one thing you would want my team to build in the next, say, 2 weeks? One thing out of my 50-page document. Well, I knew what it was, and I told him. And he goes, okay, done. We'll do that. No problem. Meet me here in 2 weeks, and I'll show you what we got, and it'll be done. And it was. And so when we met, he goes, okay, what's next? And that's how we worked for about 4 years, and we got a whole bunch of stuff done. But what he was trying to teach me was, Garth, I know you have this big vision for all this stuff, but no technology company works that way. He is the one that said, we don't do a big bang. The reason we don't is because if we're wrong, we're all gone, number one. Number two, that just isn't the way technology works. If you build a big bang, meaning like everything's different, and you have this grandiose plan, and it takes 3 years to build, by the time you build it, it is completely obsolete. So we work iteratively, and we work quickly in sort of an agile, dynamic process, and we're constantly adjusting what we want so that we never actually build something that's obsolete. But that was a really hard lesson for me, a really frustrating lesson for me, but it did teach me the importance of being able to articulate to a technologist exactly what you need and what's super important. And they are less frustrated, for sure. So those are my tips on working with technologists. When to include finance? Always. Just the one tip. Always. When to include HR? Always. In my opinion, having been the CEO of 2 subsidiaries, HR and finance are the functions that are supreme to all the rest. If HR and finance aren't bought in and haven't thought through the impacts, both financially and to people, you're sort of done, because you're going to make some really big mistakes. So these 2 people should be, if you're the leader, if you're the founder, if you're the CEO, these people should just follow you around and go to every meeting and be involved in everything. And super important business partners. So always include finance and HR. I love this quote because it's so annoying, but it is so right. The challenge of leadership is to be strong but not rude, to be kind but not weak, to be bold but not bully, to be thoughtful but not lazy, to be humble but not timid, to be proud but not arrogant, to have humor but without folly. So, good luck with all that. But that striking the balance, I think, is sort of what it's all about. I'd love to take questions about anything you want to talk about.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for coming. I used to work on a farm, and it was pretty fun. I driving trucks and stuff. I'm just curious about your work with agricultural transportation and how, how is it broken and how does it need to be fixed?
Well, I grew up on a farm, and when I was 18, I was like, I'm out of town, and I wasn't really interested in farming. But I just moved back to Pullman, which is why I'm here contributing. And my family has farmed for 5 generations around the Palouse. And so the company that I run is one of those companies for them. Farming is a really interesting business. The dynamics have changed so much. I am not an expert, but this is what I see. One, the global dynamics have changed incredibly. And we feel every negotiation almost as it's happening. We can feel prices tightening or loosening. We can feel markets and their demand going up and down based on the dynamics that are happening around the world. So one, it's a much more global business than it used to be when my great-great-grandfather was farming a few acres. Two, I think, as with all industries, farming has really tried to make their supply chain more efficient. My family had a really interesting idea, which was instead of hauling grain just down the road to the local grain elevator, and you see them all around, that they would haul it. My dad said, well, let's haul it to the river, and then we can put it right on a barge. We can skip that. And then the next generation, my nephew said, well, let's actually skip the river. Let's haul it all the way to Seattle and put it in a container on a ship, which is what we're doing now. So there's a lot of inefficiencies in farming that we're working to solve. And then the most exciting, actually, I think, is that while farmers have traditionally been selling around here in bulk, our family's been able to build a direct-to-consumer business, and all of our products are now available on Amazon with 5-star ratings under the name Palouse brand. And so, as you can imagine, there's much more margin in a 5-pound bag of chickpeas or garbanzo beans than there is in a whole truckload. So the different model of going direct to consumer is really changing farming.
Thank you. Do I gotta stand up? Okay. Earlier you were talking about a personality test, and I was wondering, what did you assume you would get and why versus what you actually got?
There's other tests, right? And in other tests, I've often been stereotyped a lion. And not that I'm not proud of that, but this test had me in the rhinoceros category, which was extremely rare, like to go off and get it done, and then come back and report to the team. And that is me. Collaboration sometimes feels slow to me, and I love to go take a huge project and go put my head down and get it done, and then come back and I'll collaborate all day long. But when I'm actually doing the work, I just need to go do my thing. So I'm a rhinoceros in this test. You'll know more when you read it.
Hi, I had a question about term sheets. So with a discounted future equity term sheet, have you ever seen a valuation cap not set? Okay. With a discounted future equity term sheet, have you seen one without a valuation cap, and was that successful?
I haven't. I think you need to force a valuation model, even if it's sort of a 3 ranges of optimism. But I think the goal of a discounted cash flow valuation is to sort of say, based on good, better, best case, what would it be? I've never seen one that's uncapped.
Okay.
Thank you.
So last resource night, our speaker had some very strong opinions about Amazon specifically and their business ethics, which was very nice to hear a different opinion about it. So I just wanted to ask your opinion on how when people have negative opinions about the business ethics at Amazon.
Ethics and integrity are super important to me. If you want to kind of get under my skin, challenge my integrity, ask anyone who knows me. So I really value my own ethics and my own integrity and my own morals. In 13 years at Amazon, I never felt that I had to compromise my morals, my values, my integrity. That said, Amazon's focus is very specifically on the customer and on the return on investment. So Amazon is firm with vendors. Amazon is firm with advertisers. There's a lot of very strong data that supports business processes that don't flex very much. And so I don't know the perspective or the examples of somebody who said that Amazon's ethics are a concern. I will say it's an open platform. Amazon is not a retailer. They own the mall and they are one of the sellers in it. But in most categories, they're not even the biggest. And so when you run an open platform and you allow anything that's legal, then people then begin making judgments about Amazon based on its own values because it's allowed something that's legal. And I think those are tricky situations. So there's been lots of difficult debates at Amazon about such and such a book or a memorabilia is legal, yet it is derogatory to certain religious or ethnic groups. So what do? Do you follow the customer sentiment or do you follow the law? And if you start editing selection based on values, then where do you stop? Because this is an open platform. So there are many rich debates, but as somebody who cares about ethics, I never felt any conflict. You're welcome.
Thank you. So I want to know, at what point was your viewpoint on the team as you see it today kind of solidified, and what was your biggest struggle in your career to get to that solidified viewpoint?
Yeah. So I sort of went back and forth on one particular spectrum a couple of times. I was what Amazon would call an industry hire. Amazon wanted to build a softlines business. They researched who they thought were leaders in the industry, and they called me. I was an industry hire. And when I came to Amazon, I can guarantee you that my perspectives were unique, sometimes a bit lonely as well, but unique. So I often, at the beginning of my time at Amazon at least, would hire an industry person over a non-industry person. And over time, I changed my view on that. And then I went too far the other way. Then I said, you know what, these industry people mostly are coming from dying retailers, or they just want to be here because Amazon's going to reinvent everything, but they actually may not have the skills to reinvent it just because they've lived in it for 20 years. So I went clear the other way and I started hiring just a whole bunch of smart people. Tons of fresh out of school MBAs. It was like as many as I could hire, I could get. And that was difficult because they lacked some of the season of somebody who's been through different business cycles and different business models and maybe failed a time or two. So I think over the last, say, 7 to 10 years, I've worked really hard to build a 50-50 mix of industry veterans to sort of smart GM types. I think you need both, and I didn't figure that out for a long time. So I think that's probably one of the things that is difficult. But you know, at Amazon, you can be a 20-year veteran, or you can be a just graduated MBA from UCLA, and you'll come into the same company in the same job and make the same money. And that's difficult for the 20-year veteran to understand. But the value is seen as the same. So I think over time for me, the mix of teams that I've built between industry veterans and just sort of smart problem solvers really changed. Yeah.
So I had a question about my group right now. We're in the process of gathering our advisors. Once I have a well-rounded board of advisors, what's the best way to extract value that's reasonable from them? I've been picturing just develop like a list of questions that we're working on and then have incremental meetings with them. Is it better to set up monthly phone calls? Should I encourage to have multiple advisors in one conference call? What's the best way to extract value that's reasonable?
Yeah, great question. I think their time is precious, so make the engagement time really efficient. Give them something to read or reflect on or study before the meeting or the call, so that you're not talking during the hour and they are doing all of the contributing. So I think giving a group of 4, 6, 8, 10 advisors the same document and saying we want feedback on this, you might get a really incredible range of opinions, supportive and not. But I would give them homework so that when you have them for that precious, say, hour, you're getting 100% feedback.
Thank you. You talked a lot about building teams, but there's also surgically correcting teams. So do you have some insights on when the amount of conflict or the mismatch with the people is good because it's helping versus when it's destructive to the team? And how do you tell the difference?
Yeah, boy, I have way too much experience with that. I have a couple. If you, when I took over Woot was a really innovative idea in its time. And the founder was super entrepreneurial, extremely creative. And Amazon wrote him a check for $83 million and in exchange wanted him to sort of assimilate. And it was my job to sort of help him understand why we were going to have to change some of the processes. And that was a real struggle for him as an individual. At the time, Amazon had, I think, acquired 14 or 15 companies. And about half of them, the founders couldn't let go and had a difficult time sort of assimilating and needed to leave. And the other half are, one of my favorites is the founder of Audible and the founder of IMDb, who are some of the, I think Audible was maybe the first Amazon acquisition way back, over 20 years ago. They're still the CEOs of those companies, and they love what Amazon has been able to add to their companies. So it really is about culture and fit. And culture, to me, is not a synonym with style. I believe that we should allow all kinds of styles, but at the end of the day, we do have to agree on what the culture is. And so it is difficult. And so I have had to make changes in entire leadership teams in a short amount of time. And that is difficult, but sometimes necessary. And in the last, I think even just 3 years ago, I worked so hard for about 3 months to recruit a certain individual from a certain company. And the day that he said yes and came to Amazon, I mean, I was like, this is my all-time best hire ever. And there were, as there always are, some red flags, but there always are. And I was okay with them. And it was probably, he turned out to be probably the most inappropriate culture fit that I've ever hired. And that wasn't that long ago, so I still have lots to learn. But Removing people is super important, even in a startup. If you allow somebody to stay on the team who's not aligned, you will not be able to get where you need to go. So it's difficult, but removing people is important at times, and I have had to do a bit of that. Go ahead.
Hi. You said that at the end of the speech you'd give a recommendation of books. I'd be really interested to see what is your favorite of those leadership books and why?
My favorite is honestly, because a lot of these are really serious intellectual books. Some are inspirational, but The Servant Leader is honestly, it's probably the best book on the list. I've given it to several employees to read, including the one I was just talking about 3 years ago. And it's a very, very good book about the way we should lead other people and humility. So it is not the hardcore business book. The most intellectually challenging, awesome book on the list is The Innovator's Dilemma by Christensen. If you haven't read it, gear down, because it's heavy, but it's really, really, really good. But The Servant Leader is like an amazing leadership book that I think everybody should read no matter what kind of job you're in.
So thanks for sharing. I've got a quick question about leadership and leading people and needing to change and changing often and quick, and how that goes, with the different personalities that you have to deal with.
So I think one of the things that I look for when I'm hiring people are people who have either learned to adapt to change, or they've just been through so many different things that at this point it's not new. Hiring people who embrace change sounds really cliche, but it is super, super important. I mean, people on my teams who have struggled with change know that one of my favorite questions to ask is, hey, I get this is hard, but here's what I don't get. At the end of the day, your paycheck's the same. Like, why are you hung up? Like, there are certain things that people get passionate about that do not really matter, but they get hung up on them because they don't like to change. I think people either are comfortable with change or they're not. And so if you have people that are comfortable with change, it's easier. And if you have people that aren't, then you have to decide whether you're going to slow down and accommodate their tolerance for change, or whether they can evolve in the process, or whether they do need to go. And just because someone is resistant to change doesn't mean they need to go. Sometimes people that are resistant to change are super valuable because they're giving you contrarian opinion that you may not have thought of. So the debate and the rub, I think, is actually really good. But at the end of the day, people have to learn to change. The businesses aren't going to survive the way most did in the past without a whole lot of rapid change. So if your people can't do that, it's just going to make your job really difficult. So then it's your sort of call about how you manage that. You can either slow down, teach them to adapt, or change the mix of the team. It's a choice.